Next thing we're going to talk about is the Amazon hardware event. Although,
So weird.
let's be real, nobody really cares about new Echoes. Like, if you're going to buy an Echo, you buy the newest one, but it's not like there was any, like, innovation
Right,
in
nobody's like
Echoes.
racing out to buy it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if you want a voice assistant and you, for some reason, want Amazon's, you buy Amazon's.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's straightforward. Which, like, I
So
mean,
we're not
I
really
have
going
them
to
all
talk.
over and I like them, but like, I have got the like first gen, like
Yeah,
dot. I don't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, there's some, like, they changed the shape so the actual Echo is a ball. Now it looks more like the. Do you remember when Google tried to release the? I think it was the like Nexus. Was it the Nexus Q or whatever? That like the original design
Yeah.
for their audio casting device. It looks like that.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that. I remember
It looks like a ball.
that.
And you can get some designs with like a tiger on it and stuff if you have kids.
Yeah.
Cool. Um, there are two specific things from their announcement event, though, that I wanted to talk about. The first of which is Luna. So Amazon has announced their game streaming service. Um, Very different from Stadia because it runs on Windows, not a custom Linux thing. So games just work. If your
Interesting.
game runs on Windows, your game runs on
So
Windows,
they
so it
didn't do
works
the
on
exact
this.
same mistake that or that Stadia has done.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's still probably gonna suck, but it might function.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're getting in here. Of course, I
It'll
still
be
have no
it'll be
interest in
much
trying
easier
it.
for developers to port games to is the most significant thing.
I mean, Amazon's just trying to take over every industry possible. They just attack every single one and see what blows up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what they do. Like, I mean, absolutely no spoilers, but the show The Boys is totally gonna end up trying to compete with Marvel as a whole.
Oh, they've already announced a spinoff.
They've already announced a spinoff, and there are things that happened in some of the most recent episodes, which is why I won't spoil it. That made me go, "Oh, it's the anti-Marvel."
Yeah.
So, like, this is another example of companies like when was the last time Amazon was first to something? They're not
That's funny.
first to anything. They go, "Oh, that company had a good idea. Let's just throw a ton of money at the same idea and see if we can make it stick or not." I mean,
Yeah.
they throw their poop at the wall and see what sticks. And
Yeah.
it's I don't know, it kind of irritates me because they are so big with so much money that they don't really have, like, I feel like they don't really have a focus for the business. It's just a matter of we'll just try everything with as much money as we can. And if it
Yeah.
blows up, then we make more money. If it doesn't blow up, then we cancel it.
Yep. Pretty much.
It's it's like Google, except they're not pretending to be visionary.
Yeah. So yeah, this will obviously integrate with Twitch, just like Google promised Stadia would integrate with YouTube, but it doesn't.
It even still
Um,
doesn't. Does it kind of now or not at all still?
I don't think it does at all. I haven't
Oh
seen
my
anything
gosh.
about Stadia on YouTube.
Oh my gosh, it's so bad.
Um, The hardware setup for this is interesting. So it's using a Cascade Lake CPU. It didn't say which one, but the GPU is the interesting thing. So it's using the T4, which is a Tesla GPU.
Which is
It's
a
essentially like
interesting.
a 70-watt version of a 2080 Super, which is dramatically lower power. Essentially, so the 2080 Super's um, teraflops is like 11 point something. This is 8 point something. And while teraflops is not necessarily the best comparison across architectures, when you're comparing essentially the same GPU,
It yeah. Then at
it's
that point,
that level. It's like, so you're essentially thinking, oh, losing a third-ish performance.
yeah.
Um, and so it'll be at 1080p at first. They did say 4K is coming eventually, probably a different hardware configuration to achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only solution I really see, unless they're doing some amazing virtualization stuff here, which, I mean, Amazon's known for. Like, Amazon does, I mean, they run AWS, right? Like, they have the
Yeah.
engineering team to be able to potentially do something, but the only way I see right now is I think they're going to end up putting in higher end GPUs, and then they'll have tiers. And the tiers are helping, you pay more if you want the 4K gaming, which means that, you're willing to help pay for that higher end hardware. Rather than just more resource allocation, it's literally higher end hardware.
Yeah. And then the pricing is the most I guess, interesting thing is what I'll say.
Of course,
So
subject to change, but
it's kind of set up like, well, the structure, not the exact dollar amount.
yeah, right.
They're structuring it like cable, where you pay for like a base package and then you pay for channels. So the main subscription from Amazon is $6 per month. And this includes, they didn't give like a full list of games, but the examples they gave were like Resident Evil 7 and Control.
Okay.
And then the first channel that will be coming to Amazon's Luna is a channel from Ubisoft, so Uplay. Most likely, the pricing will be on par with Uplay Plus's normal pricing of $15 per month because you get access to Ubisoft's games right away. But essentially, that's the way it sounds like it's going to work. Is so instead of like Stadia, where you pay for a subscription and then you pay to buy the games, and instead of Game Pass, where it's a singular set subscription, instead it's you have your base subscription, which gives you some games, and then publishers can offer their own channels. And since the games run on Windows, it would be very, very easy for EA to throw up an Origin channel. They don't really have to do anything.
Yeah, there's not a lot of work from them. I do feel a little weird because I'm not a fan of that pricing model.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a fan of pricing per channel model. I'm not a fan of it for streaming services, and therefore I don't support it for video streaming. Video streaming services. I don't go buy all the little channels. But I mean,
what I will say though is, I think that like I would hope that like Uplay Plus isn't or Uplay's channel isn't the full $15 if it's going to be a part of this. But I actually don't necessarily mind this as far as subscriptions go. I do wish there was an option to somehow utilize these services without just the subscription. I mean, either way, you don't own the game if you buy it digitally anyway.
well, unless of
But
course
like
you buy it from like GOG, but
yeah.
in
But
general, yeah.
I do like that with Stadia, there is a way to not have a subscription and to just buy games. But I do like this pricing model better than Game Pass in some ways. How much I'll like it will depend on what games are included in that main subscription, if it's a compelling enough subscription or not. But the
Yeah.
reason that I kind of like this more, and Game Pass could always add in other things, like, there's, they did add in like Origin into the existing Game Pass pricing. But the issue I
Right.
have with this is, well, it's great for consumers up front, and it's really good for people with very little money. You run into the same issue that streaming has done with music, where it kind of devalues the music. Musicians have more access to people, which is very helpful, but they also get much less per person.
So
And
I
when
have
you're looking at
I have a counterpoint to that, but I'll let you finish what you're saying.
when you're looking at games which have a much, much, much higher development cost, things like Game Pass are devaluing games.
Yeah. So I
When
think
games
that
are getting more expensive to make.
yeah, so I think that's a key important thing there. That's why I wanted to make sure to let you finish that was games are expensive to make cuz my opinion about music streaming is it has reduced the amount of money that artists get, but it's also we have a lot more artists making a living than we used to rather than a small amount of artists making stupid amounts of money. So I think streaming has been a really good thing for artists on that front. I still like to
And
go with a service that pays the most.
Yeah. And
But
don't get me wrong, like even Game Pass has shown to increase sales of games.
yeah, and it's
And
helped
so
indie developers in some ways from that perspective.
it's creating this issue where, you look at like let's look at PS5 versus Xbox Series X, for example.
Yeah.
You're looking at a situation where like people are ignoring the quality of games in some regards. And strictly looking at pricing, and they're going like, oh, okay, well, I see so many people saying like Game Pass, is like all you need for Xbox. You don't even need to buy games because you get all their first party games. But like Microsoft's first party games haven't been that good for a lot of people. You know, if you're really into Halo, you kind of get over the fact that Halo 4, Halo 5 weren't as good.
They've kind of focused in like one genre too, or one or two genres. There hasn't been a lot of branch out and uniqueness to them.
Microsoft has been pretty spread out.
I
They
think
just don't release that many.
yeah, I guess so. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
been
you have
mostly
Halo as a
shooters,
first-person shooter, Gear as a third-person shooter.
which is, I mean, similar. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but then you have Forza, you have
Yeah.
they bought Obsidian, which is Outer Wild. This is before even talking about what we're going to talk about later about them buying Bethesda. But the issue is that you're right now it's increasing sales, and I hope that keeps up. It increases sales of games by doing that.
Yeah.
But there does reach a point where people are going to say, what's the point in buying games as long as they're still on the subscription service?
Yeah, because I mean, once there's enough on there, like the biggest issue that I'd say maybe not biggest, but an issue that pretty much all gamers can share, regardless of if you play 100 hours a week or you play 2 hours a week, is that you don't have enough time to play all the games that you want to.
Yeah.
And a subscription service, when you go, okay, I can't play everything on the subscription service because I don't have time, then it will start to impact people where they will start to go, why am I going to buy another game outside of this unless it's something they really want? They're not going to try something else. They're going to go,
Yeah.
I already have other things to try that don't cost me any extra over what I'm paying.
Yeah. And so it's like you're running into a point where, like, for some people, if you're not on the subscription service, you're not going to get tried. You're just losing out on that. And so it's kind of forcing developers into that subscription service as well in some regards.
And that's kind of the part that sucks in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, with this, that's where I kind of like this is I feel like it's still a good value overall for consumers. You know, Ubisoft releases a lot of games. Uplay Plus at $15 a month is still a good value compared to buying those games separately if you like Ubisoft games. And so
it gives the consumer a little bit of choice in that regard, and to pick and choose specific areas that they want to spend more money on.
Yeah. And so you run into this situation where essentially now you have like Game Pass as this like kind of like the Netflix of
game
Netflix
streaming,
of game of well, not necessarily just game streaming, but of game subscriptions.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's a lot of content. Some of the content is really good. Some of the content is really bad. And then a lot of the content is just pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good
kind
point.
of how Netflix is right now.
And this seems more like an Apple TV approach that Amazon's doing if we were to compare streaming services in terms of being able to add channels and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Or I mean, even how Amazon is set up, where Amazon's subscription service has its own shows, and then you can add other services to Amazon,
like CBS or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
And I feel like that method simultaneously helps improve access for gamers while also not cutting costs so much that it potentially changes how games are going to be made. Like, I feel like we've seen this kind of, I'll move on from this in a second, but like we've seen this kind of shift where like Microsoft has indicated that Halo Infinite is not necessarily like the last Halo, but it's the last Halo for a while, and they'll just add to that.
Yeah.
Which is fine if they actually do add more like story missions and stuff.
Like they do a lot, yeah.
Yeah. But like Grand Theft Auto, for example, they said with Grand Theft Auto 5 they were going to do story DLC, but they made so much money from online, they never did. And their online content wasn't remotely the same type of content. And so like my worry is that because it's going to be like, you don't get the hundreds of millions of dollars in sales at a launch of a game, it's not going to be viable for some games to release new titles every few years. And as long as they're doing like a steady drip of that type of content that people want from that, that's fine. So like I think it works very well for games like Microsoft Flight Simulator, where you don't
Yeah.
need a new Microsoft Flight Simulator all the time.
Or even like
Or
GTA, online specifically, not the
yeah.
regular story. Yeah, that kind of
Um,
game. Yeah.
the other example I was going to use was Forza, where it's kind of been hinted
Mm.
at that the next Forza is going to be, especially for the not Horizon, but the actual core Forza game.
Yeah.
And for sports games in general, it's kind of pointless to release new ones all the time.
So
And
they could
so
do
for those
subscription. Yeah.
games, it makes sense to join a subscription service like this and then have for Forza, you just release new tracks and new cars, and that's perfect for those players.
Right.
But what you don't want to see, or I don't want to see at least, is like a Halo game. Like if they release a really good Halo game, and then they just don't release a new Halo game. They like add new maps for multiplayer. They maybe like add a new area here and there, kind of go the Destiny route. But I'd rather see new releases if it's a single player or like a small co-op game, because you get
Yeah.
the actual full-on story that they intend.
I
Whereas I
agree.
feel like
Yeah.
forcing them to drag it out in order to reduce costs, I don't like that. Like it's gonna hurt the game.
It is. Yeah. And so that starts to make me wonder if we should start to see a separation of the online and the regular games in terms of
Hmm.
like Halo, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. And I
That's
think
kind of
it's.
what
Go ahead.
that's kind of what Cyberpunk is doing, where Cyberpunk is releasing just the single player content at first, and then they are working on some kind of Cyberpunk-esque online server or online game. They've
Yeah,
said
that'll
that.
be interesting to see too. I'm
Um,
excited.
and then we've also seen that with Last of Us, where Last of Us 1 had a multiplayer factions mode that a lot of people really liked, and Last of Us 2 did not release with a multiplayer mode, but they're working on something.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are kind of seeing that shift too, and I think that'll be better. Is I think like decouple the single player stuff from the multiplayer stuff allows you to kind of release better content for both. Going back
I
to
think so too.
GTA as the last thing I'll mention on this before we move on to the spy drone
Well, I
is
have a couple of additional, but yeah, yeah,
oh, okay. GTA Online was announced as this thing that would expand with new areas and eventually kind of just be like its recurring online service.
yeah,
It's GTA MMO-esque thing.
yeah,
That didn't happen either. Literally none of what they said would happen with Grand Theft Auto 5 did. Instead, they just released things that they could milk microtransactions and shark cards for.
yeah, which sucks. It
Yeah.
became a kind of crappy experience in my opinion. And I think it's also important to look at the the cost versus streaming kind of thing. In each industry is its own thing, and that was something I wanted to mention was like you look at music, right? Like most of the music services, you get basically all music, right?
Yeah.
Like you subscribe, especially to like Tidal or Amazon Music. Don't subscribe to Amazon Music, but you subscribe to one of the ones like Tidal, who pays artists really well, and also is on a mission to have more songs than anybody else, which they do even more than Apple Music. You get everything for the price you're paying. And then you move up to TV and TV and movie streaming, right? And then there's these packages and stuff, but the cost goes up significantly for movies, and then the cost goes up significantly again for games. And so it has to be approached different, and that's something I think it's important for consumers to have in their head, is that you have to approach the way that you're going to have to buy this content differently, because it can't be super cheap.
Yeah.
It just
If
can't.
everything was just a $10 subscription service, like if it was $10 for all games, $10 for all movies and TV, and $10 for all music, that would just destroy movies and TV, and that would destroy games long term.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
viable.
It's not at all viable. And so that I
Games
think.
and movies cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make in some
Yeah.
cases.
And I think that also is emphasizing your point about, like it's really going to hurt some portions of the gaming industry if they can't collect that money really fast, right? Like no doubt a lot of developers spend so much money that they have to pull out loans and stuff to finish these
Mhm.
games. But, the loan companies are more comfortable knowing that when they launch their game, chances are they're going to have the money to pay it off in a week.
Yeah.
And I'm not a developer. I don't work internally, but I can guess that sort of thing is happening where they're not pulling out a 10-year loan for Cyberpunk, right? It's like, we're
Yeah.
going to pull out this loan and you're going to get your money instantly.
And that's where, people get so mad about Epic exclusivity and things like that. But that's why they go to Epic, is Epic essentially offers them an upfront on their game
Yeah.
profit, or on their game sales.
They help them pay for the development. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're gonna guarantee us this amount of money. Okay, cool. do that. That especially for smaller games, indie games, that makes perfect sense. Like
Yeah.
getting a guaranteed amount of your sales up front is so helpful.
A big deal. It's
Um,
a really big deal.
yeah. And I just the like attempt at like all-in-one subscription services, I just feel like they have their ups and downs. They'll be good for some types of games and not others. We'll talk about it more when we get to the Microsoft stuff.
Yeah.
But let's talk about
Let's talk about
the
why.
creepiest product.
Yes. Why?
Don't buy this.
This is So if you're the type of person where you would really like that Amazon has a nice drone flying around watching you during your deep voice time, then you should buy this.
Yeah. So Amazon announced a new Ring camera that is a drone that flies around your home.
I can't believe it's part of Ring.
Yeah. And it was this drone camera was designed with privacy first, and it will hum at a certain volume so that whenever it's flying around and recording, it's privacy you can hear.
I'm sorry, but
I don't want to hear my privacy. I want to have my privacy.
that's the funny thing, is saying it's privacy you can hear is such a dumb statement, not just because I don't believe you, Amazon, but also because when that noise is happening, that means things are not private right now.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't understand why anybody's going to buy this. Like, I don't know how they're going to market it, because you're better off just having static cameras installed in your house, which they make.
Even for like the best example of someone I saw on Twitter talking about this was they were saying like for like when they're out of town, and like I guess that would be the best situation for this that I could see is if you don't want cameras in general.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to install cameras that you have all the time active, but you could just unplug those. But like this could theoretically be useful for a situation where if you travel a lot, you don't use this at all when you're home or when you're in town, and then you only plug it in and run it when you're out of town.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. But of course, they're still collecting detailed maps of your homes to attempt to sell you stuff, just like Roomba, except that this can actually see it. Roomba just bumps into stuff and is like, oh, you have a couch in this X-shaped room, which is like not really that big of a privacy invasion. Whereas Amazon, can very much so be like, you mount your TV on this wall and a certain size TV will fit on that wall. So let's advertise you bigger TVs.
And like for clarification and for accuracy, like nothing in the terms and conditions, I believe, would allow for that now. But the thing is that terms and conditions and privacy policies are not locked in, which I feel like needs to change. There should be something where, like, privacy can't get worse for X amount of time after buying a product. I feel like needs to be a thing.
Yeah, there needs to be like a 2-year section where they're not allowed to change this portion of the TOS.
Yeah, it's like the fact that you could buy this and then a year from now, Amazon could change the privacy policy and say, oh, we're allowed to use scans of your house to tell which type of clothes that you have in your open door of your closet and then sell you more of that. Or, oh, we're allowed to, as you mentioned, like tell what type of TV you have and try and advertise you bigger TVs. That type of thing.
You think about like the value of that data, right? Like they're going to try and do that. I have no doubt in my mind they're going to try and do that, because how valuable it is, like for Amazon, where they can be like, okay, we see where you have your TV and you can't fit bigger than a 55-inch. They just won't show you anything bigger than a 55 when you're searching and for advertising and for external advertisers, because it doesn't fit. And and then they can, again with Roomba, like Roomba doesn't bug me because it's just the shape of your house, and that's useful data for understanding that, like, oh, you have a couch, so you might want to buy a couch because you already have the space for it. But like being able to see it in color, right, as well as seeing the walls and stuff is a big deal, where they can understand the style of your house and maybe get predictions based on they like bright and vibrant colors, and those are the types of clothes and products they advertise to you. It's really creepy.
Well, and then even then, think about, like, obviously they're not going to be able to process this like on device, especially initially, but like think about how much data they could gather with machine learning algorithms on the that pull from the camera. So, you could potentially with camera data of somebody's house, tell everything from, do they have a mini fridge in their room, at which point you could probably sell them more drinks,
Uh-huh.
because they're probably the type of person to have sodas or Gatorades or whatever in their room and drink that stuff more. Do they have commonly like cheap kitchen items, or do they have pretty expensive ones? Do they
Yeah.
have a sound bar for their TV or speakers? Do they use on-brand Kleenex or not? Like, you can pretty much tell everything about someone from constantly being able to see their home. And
And
so
so
there needs to
creepy.
be something. The only way that I could ever, even with the out of town thing, the only way I could ever be comfortable with suggesting that somebody buys this product, especially from Amazon, but realistically from anyone,
Basically, unless you're self-hosting the recording service for it.
that, or if there is some kind of like legal contract that they have to, like, the company is like offering to agree to you that cannot be changed for X amount of time.
Right, kind of like a thing where like you have to re-sign this, like they can change it, but you would have to re-sign it again in order for it to be
Correct.
changed
Yeah,
at
you
a
would
and
have to
after a
agree
certain
to it,
period.
and the
Yeah.
product, and they can't like disable the product because you didn't agree to that change.
Right. Or just, change it immediately after you sign, change it and ask you to sign again, which is what TOS does a lot. It'd have to be like,
Yeah,
we won't change this for 2 years. And when that change happens, if it happens, you have to sign for it so you can
yeah.
look at it.
Because like the thing is, like, yes, cameras in some regards, stationary cameras could do that, but you can pick the positioning of
Uh-huh.
stationary cameras. And on top of that, stationary cameras can't get closer to the thing that they want to detect.
Yeah, exactly. So they're not going to be able to potentially read stuff. I mean, this thing could see you type in a password or something. And, actually,
Well, even separate from that, like, let's assume that these aren't probably the best cameras, and let's assume that they aren't going to be like up behind you as you're typing.
yeah.
Um, just being able to get data from multiple angles from the same camera in one motion allows you to tell so much more about an item than a stationary image.
Also a good point. Yeah, especially for something that's automated, not when the human eye is seeing it, right? But
Yeah,
like machine learning. And
yeah.
another thing about terms of service that I wish would happen, and this is related to this, is games and software have release notes and show you a change log. I wish every time terms of service was updated, there was here's the changes at the
Mhm.
top. So if you want to read it, it might take you 2 hours to read the TOS, but if you want to read the changes, it's 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
and
would
then that would
help.
be another thing where if they did that, then that would make some people more willing to read the entire terms of service, because if you only have to read the entire thing once, and then
Uh
all of the
huh.
changes are highlighted after that, then it's like, when you're looking at, let's say, for um, a smartphone or Google Assistant or one of those things where you're probably not changing brands very often. And so the terms and conditions are something that you will be dealing with for years and years.
Then it's worth reading through the whole
Spending two
thing.
hours reading through a terms of service for Apple, and that, if that's your phone, your tablet, your computer, reading a terms
Yeah.
of service or two for what is potentially the next 10 years of products is not that unreasonable, and people would maybe do it sometimes. Obviously, a lot of people still wouldn't, but
I would though at that
more
point. That'd
people
be
would.
the
Yeah,
enough incentive for me to want to read through a lot of them.
yeah.
So yeah,
Um,
and with that note too, is this being a consumer item? We've seen you put in here how Ring cameras have been hacked, and
mhm.
I wanted to mention that actually Ring has never technically been breached. They have only had people using fucking garbage passwords, but that's an important point to Ring as a service. Is it's a consumer service, and people are going to use bad passwords for
Yeah,
Ring, and that's gonna cause more privacy invasion where somebody's using a horrible password. And like Ring's really pushing for two-factor authentication now, but obviously that annoys people. People won't use it sometimes, and then you add in a bad password. Now all of a sudden somebody can fly around your home, which
yeah,
is just like unacceptable.
yeah, and, like, one of the examples with, somebody gaining access to somebody else's ring that is especially, like, the type of thing that you need to think about when looking at these products is,
Yeah.
there was a situation where, a camera that parents had in their, um, daughter's room was breached, and the person started like not just watching that camera, but like talking through it and playing music and stuff. And essentially, you had this like random person essentially attempting to interact with an 8-year-old girl through this camera
Oh, it
that
just like
got
it gives
breached.
me shivers. It's so
Yeah,
creepy. And I don't recall. We talked about that story when it happened, but I don't recall if it was if the person was being malicious in terms of like you know I don't want to say it for a factor of monetization, but
yeah, I know what you're getting at.
yeah, or if they
I
were just
don't
like
think so.
proof of hacking, being
I
silly.
don't. I think it. So like, let me go through. I actually pulled up the article
Mm,
again. Few days. So the family installed the device to keep an eye on their daughter. A few days later, the family said a stranger had gained access to the device and was talking to the little girl. In a video from the Ring device, the child standing in her room asks, "Who is that?" A man responds that he's her best friend. "I'm Santa Claus. Don't you want to be my best friend?" he says. And then the girl, obviously terrified, like screams for her mom.
yeah,
Um, the hacker apparently then uh, played music for the girl and instructed her to mess up her room and break her television.
that's just weird.
Yeah.
That's just creepy. And again, that one was one where they used a shitty password. And it's like how easy, if I recall correctly, which is like how easy is it to get into somebody's stuff if they use a crappy password? And so many people
Mhm.
don't understand password security, and they don't, you know, they don't realize why it's important. They're told it's important, but they don't necessarily believe it.
Yeah.
So it's just weird, man.
Um,
Because if
one
after that happened, I
second.
think Ring sent out a statement saying, to be clear, like they weren't breached, but it was more
Well,
so
they
that
got sued by this family, so I'm assuming it was part of the lawsuit that they were trying to say that it wasn't them because of course they're going to say that either way.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I'm trying to go through this story. We can talk about it some other time. We have
yeah,
way too much to go through.
yeah. There's still a long section of the
But
podcast
yeah,
here.
just don't buy this. There's no guarantee that they don't change the terms of service. And like I doubt initially they would go so far as like trying to scan individual products, but it's like you just slowly over time degrade that. So initially they can't do anything. It is very privacy focused. And then a year from now they offer a cheaper version. And you don't know why, but oh, in the terms of service, they're allowed to do like general scans of your home to tell how big your home is so that they can advertise products.
Yep.
And then a year from then, it's another thing and another thing. And
And it just starts to get creepier
yeah,
and creepier. I don't want Amazon in my house, please no.